Welcome to a fantastic edition of Rebellion's educational series. I'm here with one of the most brilliant AI engineers I've come across the last decade, Dr. Alex Antic. Did I pronounce that right?
Correct.
Fantastic. Alex has done everything in AI. I mean, he was the senior data scientist for Accenture Australia. He oversaw 3 or 4 government divisions, rollout of data science. When it comes to LinkedIn, there are very few people I follow and I learn from constantly, but Alex is one of them. And I highly recommend everyone to follow him on LinkedIn and learn from him as I have. So we're going to cover AI in Australia. Thank you so much again.
My pleasure. Great to chat to you today, Alex.
So how's the scene there? Is it hot, slow? I know nothing about it.
I'd say it's pretty hot here. There's a lot happening, both in the private sector and government sector as well. There's a lot of interest and uptake and appetite for all things data science and AI. A lot of organizations are trying to learn how it best fits into their realm, and they're looking at ways to explore that. A lot of really interesting questions posed. How do we make it work in our realm? How do we make it scale? It's a fascinating space to be in. Very exciting.
So I think about Italy, where they have lots of great schools like Australia, but then they have no companies to hire the engineers. Are there a lot of AI jobs in Australia?
I think there are. I still think there's more people than there are jobs in some ways, given
Mhm.
the huge interest in people studying data science and AI and people transitioning from other areas of expertise. I know people have come from chemistry, biology, physics that want to get in on the action, that love working with data and exploring new ideas. I think there's a lot more that'll happen in the next year or two where a lot more organizations realize that they need to scale up their capabilities, and there'll be just increasing hiring going on. But I do think there's a lot of opportunity here for anyone interested in data and data science.
Is the entrepreneurial scene more hot in Perth, Sydney, or Melbourne, or hot in all three?
I'd say Sydney and Melbourne are leading the way, and there's a large increase that's also been taking place in Canberra, near where I live.
Mhm.
But yeah, Sydney and Melbourne being the largest cities
Well, can you
definitely
tell our
dominate the
viewers where
space.
exactly in Australia that is?
Sure, it's a capital city. It's almost halfway between Sydney and Melbourne. Yeah,
Oh,
well, it's only small, maybe 400,000 people.
awesome. And I lived in Australia for a bit when I was a kid, and I
Oh
absolutely love
wow.
it. Yeah, I spent time Alice Springs, Sydney, Cairns, Brisbane. I have a lot of friends in Australia, and I think that if I couldn't live in America, I'd probably want to live in Australia. So
Fantastic.
absolutely wonderful country. So if you're an entrepreneur, is there good VC money available? Is there good government money? How's the scene like there?
I think compared to the US, it's not quite at that level. I think it's much more competitive and difficult to source funding, either from government or from, VC market. I think there's still potential for um, tapping into wealth of funds in the government space. I've seen a lot of funding coming out
So do you
in the
think
past
VC
year.
firms should consider putting money to work in the Australian AI scene?
I'd say definitely yes. Yeah, I'd be a big proponent of that.
That's an interesting point. Actually, that might be a good article for one of my students to look at. So I saw that you worked with both immigration and a number of other groups. Tell me about rolling out data science divisions in the government. How is that like?
The really interesting thing about the government space, especially at the federal level, is you've got access to incredible data sets, data that covers the entire population. So very rich sources of data and huge opportunity to make a positive impact on Australian citizens. And at the time, there was a lot of appetite for trying to leverage current and emerging technology to actually make a difference, to shift from making decisions based on anecdotal and tacit knowledge to one that is driven by data and evidence-based support. And there's been just increasing, improvements in how that's done at the point which it can be scaled at a level that positively impacts decision making decision. I guess making the process for decision makers much better and easier.
What about access to education? If I'm a poor student who's 16 or 17, is it hard for me to get data science or AI background?
Not at all. There are many avenues you can go through. Starting by looking at STEM subjects at school, then progressing to university or tertiary education. And then, as we know, there's a lot of free and cheap courses available online for many students these days. So it's very much at your fingertips. Whatever you want to learn, you can easily learn these days, which is fantastic.
By the way, Alex, I apologize. I have to tell our viewers the lighting where I am is absolutely insane. It's coming and going between gigantic shades of light and bits of darkness. So my apologies for my odd lighting. Didn't expect that to happen. But I'd like to talk about mining, which has, obviously been a huge part of the Australian economy for many years. In America, we saw a lot of press regarding automated trucks, but was that a one-off mine, or do you see the entire mining community really jumping on AI and automation?
Very much. I think that whole sector has had huge uptake in that technology, given the incredible benefit it offers to them in terms of saved man hours and capability and profit uplift. So I think they're leading the way with a lot of these technologies, especially when it comes to using IoT. The sensors and edge computing. There's so much being done in that space. I know
Mm.
some people who are leading that way, and I think that's a huge area for learning about new techniques and how they then can apply to other industries and sectors as well. So they're definitely hitting it hard and doing really well in that space.
We had a Finnish professor on a few months ago talking about using computer vision from satellite images to monitor uh, the land and the ecology. Given that Australia has such fantastic natural resources, and being myself an avid scuba diver, is the government looking into using computer vision to monitor the Great Barrier Reef, to monitor the outback, to monitor, obviously these huge swaths of land where you can only have so many eyes and ears?
Exactly, and I've heard anecdotally at least evidence that that is being used at scale, especially in agriculture. For farming and monitoring resources in various capacities. There is a lot being done, and I think there's more and more work and effort being put into that, especially on the research side in academic institutions. And the government is very perceptive of the benefit they can provide to them. So they're very much looking to leading researchers to help steer them in the right direction. But there is funding available and some huge initiatives, some really exciting initiatives taking place broadly.
I've got to say, I've traveled all over the world, but Australia to me is one of the places I would recommend everyone go to before they die in regards to the amazing natural beauty that's there. It's really unparalleled. Maybe that and the Vancouver western parts of Canada are really as amazing as they get.
Yes.
No, definitely. But uh, Alex, I've got to go to a boring question now. Taxes. What are the tax rates like for corporations and individuals in Australia?
Individuals, I think it's about 35 to 48%. Corporations, from memory, is around the 30 mark. But please don't quote me on that. Haven't kept up to date. So
No. About
very,
estimate is fine. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
we've come across countries where we've seen taxes in the 70 to 80% range. And then of course there's Ukraine that has like a 4.5% tax rate. But
yes,
obviously you get what you pay for in life though. So I
indeed,
listen,
indeed.
I'm Ukrainian, so I feel like I'm allowed to say that. But I don't think anyone would disagree that the lifestyle in Australia versus Ukraine is not comparable. Bondi Beach has something that nowhere in Ukraine has. So,
That's fascinating. My maternal grandmother's Ukrainian as well. So
oh,
there you
really?
go.
Yeah. No, my family's from Lvov. Half my family's from Lvov. The other half's generally from a bit of Germany, a bit of Lithuania. So, but really been around that area for a very long time. So it seems like the VC scene still has some ways to go. Government is very supportive, though, and the taxes seem to be pretty okay. So if I were an AI engineer and I was looking for a new place to live, would you recommend a 35-year-old AI engineer to consider moving to Australia?
100%. I think there's so much happening both in large corporate organizations, say finance, investment space, retail investment banking. On the government side, there's
Well,
huge
are the
potential.
salaries good though? I mean, are these strong salaries?
They are, I think some would be comparable to what you're seeing in the US market, especially with the larger organizations. I think you can live very comfortably and do very well from that.
Italy is really very upsetting to me. I love Italy. That's one of those beautiful countries in the world. But a senior AI engineer who could make in the hundreds of thousands in America will make top out at $65,000 in Italy.
Wow.
So I highly recommend all of the Italian engineers watching to move to Australia as soon as possible and to get on that. So so just getting to the lifestyle of Australia, what are your favorite parts of living in Australia?
Well, for me, I live out in the country, so being able to go trail running, mountain biking, hiking, camping nearby to me is just perfect. I mean, from having lived here, the countryside is just amazing, especially if you're anywhere near the ocean. It's beautiful.
Yeah, no, it sounds like people move to Silicon Valley and the San Francisco Bay Area. Very much so.
Exactly.
No, no, very much so. So I've had a really fun time talking with you, Alex. Let's get to a little more on the technical side now that we've talked about the actual country. What are you excited about right now in the world of AI?
Wouldn't know where to begin. One thing that I've been really passionate about is seeing increasing acceptance and an effort being placed around the notion of responsible AI, around the ethics and bias elements, and that both public and private sector government organizations and the federal government are taking it much more seriously these days and seeing it as an opportunity to really make a difference, how to take this forward into the future. So that's filled me with a lot of confidence that we're moving in the right direction to ensure that we have the right processes, frameworks, and practices in place to ensure that in AI at scale is used responsibly. Been involved in some interesting work around privacy enhancing technology. So ensuring that data that is shared between organizations is done so in a way that protects the privacy of citizens and individuals.
Do you think that privacy will be enhanced moving forward, or do you think we'll lose more privacy on it from a
I'm
30,000 foot?
sure, I'm hoping that technologies like confidential computing and privacy enhancing technology, things like homomorphic encryption and differential privacy will actually improve that capability and make things much more private for us as citizens. We take much more of that privacy into our own hands than maybe has been the norm both currently and in the past. So I feel quite positive about that moving forward. I think there's a lot more technology in that space that's making things easier. And I'm seeing also a lot more adoption of graph analytics and the use of graph architectures and databases to actually come up with really interesting insights, especially on the law enforcement side, looking at uncovering cohorts of suspicious individuals, etc.
No, there's fantastic potential in law enforcement. And in terms of responsible AI, it makes me think of a really cool British company on Fido that created facial recognition technology, but knowing that it's bias for darker skin, they worked with the driver's license registry so that they could have the faces plugged in through that, and that was a way to try to take out bias. But I think you make a great point about responsible AI and how that will be moving forward. I guess I'm optimistic, but I'm also worried. I think also about the medical hackers that I hear about. I worry. Will elderly with a pacemaker get a phone call asking for $5,000 or it turns off type stuff? I mean,
Yes.
that's the extreme, of course, but hopefully, as technology moves forward, it gets strong enough to provide people with this kind of privacy and the security. Um, so I also see you you work at the Data Science Institute of the Australia National University.
Yeah, we're in a new Software Innovation Institute, which I've been helping lead and head up data science for them. Yes.
Lovely. Do you want to tell us quickly about that as well?
Yeah, sure. So a key part of that was really to help bridge the gap between academic study and how you apply data science and data engineering in practice.
But you did that at
So
two other schools or one other school as well?
it's within our College of Engineering and Computer Science. So it's in one institute which represents data science for the entire university, Australian National
Okay.
University. Yeah, and a key initiative has been this idea of setting up a teaching hospital like what they use in field of medicine, but for data engineers and data scientists. So during their studies, they have, I guess, they have access to real world application of what they're actually learning. So when they enter the workforce, they're much better prepared to take their learnings to actually help drive impact and change for the employer they're working for.
There's so many schools in America that just have absolutely no desire to look at data science or to consider technology like that. I think it's really just putting your head in the sand in my own alma mater, Amherst College, which is considered a top school. We have a president and a Supreme Court justice who went to our school, but they refuse to open a data science institute. They refuse to do any type of work with data science, and it's just data science is the world of today and tomorrow. So
Surprised
I
to hear that.
yeah, no, it's been very frustrating. I think that COVID has been kind of opened the eyes for a lot of institutions that are kind of stuck in their old way of education. The education of tomorrow must include data science. It must include programming. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Alex, is that I think Australia has a national mindset from the many friends I talk to that is very pro technology. Like Ukraine, Australia very much is rushing forward on the technological world. Ukraine, Sweden, Austria, Australia. These are the countries that I've identified as just being hyper, kind of moving forward. And it's been great to talk to you today and kind of feel that in real life. But
Yes.
before I let you go, any closing thoughts for our viewers?
I think the future is very bright for anyone interested in data and all things data science. I mean, it is what underpins artificial intelligence, which is, of course, growing at scale globally.
Most of our viewers are like 25, 26-year-old, either grad or a lot of undergrad students, a lot of, first, second year tech guys. What advice would you give to the up and coming data scientist, up and coming AI scientist?
No, great point. So my key advice is to focus on understanding the fundamentals behind data science and AI, really understand the mathematics and statistics that drives it, understand how a lot of the machine learning algorithms work under the hood. Make sure your coding is very strong. Make sure you understand the key principles and paradigms around software engineering. So when you're actually productionizing these models or working with software engineers, you know how to speak to them and how to integrate the models in a productive and efficient way. And also think of the soft skills that are important to building a career and your profile, things like networking, the ability to speak in front of an audience, the whole notion of data storytelling, how to present your material, your research to a way that aligns to the strategic goals of organizations you work for, and very much focus more on the business objectives and outcomes rather than the technology itself. The technology is an enabler, but the key focus is always on what is the strategic goals that you aim to meet, and how can you use data and technology to actually to get there, to drive you forward. So I think if you adhere to those key principles, I think you can have a really exciting and prosperous career ahead of you.
Love it. This was a lot of fun, Alex. I'd like to do some more shows in the future on ethical AI. So I really hope to have you on for a conversation about that. And I guess have a great morning over there, right?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Fantastic. I'm off to dinner now. So
all the best.
thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, Alex.
My pleasure.